Mike Ogline, 622 Overlook Drive. And I'd like to sort of second what Doug Schwartz has said. I was also privileged to be a member of the city's long-term land use study committee, as well as a member of council. I was in fact the councilman who drafted and sponsored this particular piece of legislation. And for what it's worth, have some background in this, having served the city as law director and also chairman of its Board of Zoning Appeals quite a few years back. When we looked at this ordinance, what we were really trying to do was to define different types of zones for different types of housing, because there are different types of housing. There are apartments, there are duplexes, there are congregate living arrangements, group homes, and also there are single-family residences. And as Councilman Klein has pointed out, I think the numbers were pretty close to the same thing back then. I don't have my notes, but we had a roughly 20% higher ratio of rental properties to owner-occupied properties than the statewide average. And the conclusion of the comprehensive study committee was that we had more than sufficient rental property available to accommodate the needs of people in the city. Bear in mind that the definition of single family only applies to an R1 district. That's all we're talking about, is what is the definition of a single family for purposes of determining what constitutes a single family use. And if you actually take a look at your zoning code, and it's 1120.03 in the codified ordinances, it states specifically the intent. The intent of the district is to provide for an environment of predominantly single-family dwellings. The ordinance itself came about in response to many constituent complaints about the proliferation of what I describe as boarding houses in what had been traditionally single-family residential neighborhoods. And what council concluded at that time, and it was followed up on with the long-term land use study committee, was that people should be allowed to live in predominantly single-family neighborhoods, and that a boarding house or an apartment building is not a single-family use. The code permits these uses in other districts. So people can live in the arrangements that they wish to live in. They just have to choose the neighborhoods where they're going to do it. The same logic says that you can't have an apartment building or build a new apartment building in an R1 district. When we looked at this on the study committee, commission, what we were also looking at was that this is an economic development issue for the city of Alliance. You know, the zoning code, like the planning code, these are all part of the fabric that the community establishes to try to provide for future development and use of land. Now, you know, you've been around long enough, you know how this works, because there's invariably somebody who finds themselves on what they perceive as being unduly burdened by broad-based regulations that set a format for how the city is going to be used and developed. But when we looked at this was what the conclusion was, that we needed to have solid, single-family residential neighborhoods where families could go and live with similar people without having the different types of higher intensity uses around them. Congregate living arrangements have higher levels of traffic, they have a higher level of tenant turnover. They are simply incompatible with the traditional single-family neighborhood. And I heard one gentleman talking about wanting his daughter to live there, but I rather doubt that he lives in a neighborhood where he has a group home or a boarding house next to him. He's probably living in an R1 zone. This is part of a Euclidean zoning plan. They're found throughout the country. Law Director Zumbar and I both researched this somewhat extensively. We looked at ordinances in other communities. In answer to Councilman Ryan's question, yes, we did look at different numbers of people. I think at one point the ordinance actually provided not more than 4 unrelated persons, and that was subsequently changed to not more than 2. What we were trying to do was provide for both what I call sort of traditional family structures and maybe non-traditional family structures, because we didn't want to inadvertently discriminate against people trying to maintain a genuine family unit by providing a definition that was too restrictive. This was the subject of extensive debate at the time. Council heard from many people. We heard from the landlord community, from the realtor community. There was an awful lot of input. Thank you for your time. But what I would say is helpful.